All right, let's dive into what's happening in California because it's kicking off one of the biggest shifts in corporate transparency we've seen in U.S. history. We're going to break down these new laws that are forcing thousands of companies to come clean about their climate impact. We're talking everything from their emissions down to their financial risks.
And you gotta understand, this is a huge deal. California isn't just any state. We're talking about an economy so massive it could be its own country. So when California talks, the business world listens. It's using all that economic muscle to demand some real honesty on climate.
So you might be wondering, why did California feel the need to go it alone and create its own rules? And why right now? Well, it really boils down to a perfect storm of pressure, a serious gap in data, and a vacuum in federal policy.
It really was a perfect storm. First off, California is on the front lines, dealing with billions in damages from megafires and droughts. At the very same time, investors were basically flying blind. They were complaining that the voluntary reports from companies were all over the place, totally inconsistent and impossible to compare. And with the federal SEC rules getting delayed, California lawmakers just decided, you know what, we can't wait any longer. So the state's answer came in the form of two landmark bills that were passed back in October 2023, SB 253 and SB 261. They're designed to work together, but they each target a different, really crucial piece of the climate accountability puzzle. Here's a simple way to think about it. SB 253, you can call that the numbers law. It forces the biggest companies, those with over $1 billion in revenue, to report all of their greenhouse gas emissions. Then you've got SB 261, the risk law. That one requires slightly smaller companies to publicly disclose how climate change could actually hurt their bottom line, and importantly, what they're planning to do about it. Now, the absolute game changer in SB 253 is this focus on what's called Scope 3 emissions. This is not just about the pollution from a company's own factories. No, this covers their entire value chain. We're talking about emissions from their suppliers, from transporting their goods, and even from you, the customer, using their products. It's a massive, massive accounting task that really changes the whole idea of what a company is responsible for.
And the scale here is just enormous. The agency in charge of all this, the California Air Resources Board, everyone just calls them CARB, they estimate that nearly 7,400 businesses could fall under these rules. So this isn't some tiny niche regulation, it's a huge net being cast over a massive part of the U.S. economy.
But, passing a law is one thing. Actually putting it into practice is a whole different ballgame. The journey from bill to compliance has been anything but smooth, with a lot of debate over delays and a real race to get the final rules written.
The rollout has been, let's just say, complicated. Early in 2024, there was a big push to delay everything, but the legislature said no and held firm. They did give the regulator, CARB, a little more time to write the rules, but the process has been so complex that CARB has now had to delay its own deadline for finalizing them until early 2026. So here's the absolute crucial point in all this. Despite all the regulatory back and forth and the delays, the deadlines for companies to actually start collecting their data and preparing their reports, those have remained locked in place. The clock is still ticking for them. It was pretty much inevitable, right? A mandate this ambitious was immediately challenged. The fight quickly moved from the state capitol to the courtroom, pitting major business groups against the state of California in a really high-stakes legal battle. So the central legal argument here, brought by groups like the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, it all hinges on the First Amendment. They're arguing that forcing a company to publish climate data is a form of compelled speech, basically making them broadcast a message they might not agree with. This all led to a really dramatic turn of events late last year. A federal court issued a split decision. It slammed the brakes on SB 261, the financial risk law, right before its first deadline was about to hit. But, and this is so important, it left SB 253, the big emissions reporting law, totally in place and still moving forward. So now all eyes are on January 9th, 2026. That's the date for the next major hearing, and the court's decision then could either clear the path for these laws or maybe stop them right in their tracks. The future is very, very much up in the air. But look, regardless of what happens in court, these laws have already sent shockwaves way beyond California. So let's take a look at why this whole thing matters for the entire U.S. economy, and really, the world. So what does this mean for businesses on the ground? Well, these deadlines are coming up fast. Companies need to start reporting their direct emissions for the year 2025 by the middle of 2026. And then, just 1 year later, that much tougher Scope 3 data is due.
So even with all the legal fights, that clock is ticking.
So what's the big picture here? Why does this all matter so much? For one, it sets a powerful precedent. It's basically becoming a national standard by default. It's also giving investors that consistent, comparable data they've been begging for. That super tough Scope 3 rule, it forces big companies to work with their entire supply chain on emissions. And finally, it makes climate risk a mandatory conversation in boardrooms everywhere.
Now, the regulators know this is a heavy lift. CARB has made it pretty clear they're not going to come out swinging, punishing companies right away. For those first reports in 2026, they've said there won't be penalties for businesses that can show they're making a genuine, good-faith effort to comply. The goal here is to get companies started, not to demand perfection on day one.
And that leaves us with the big, multi-billion-dollar question. California has drawn a line in the sand, using its incredible economic power to force a new level of corporate honesty on climate change. With the final word now resting with the courts, we're all left to wonder, is this the beginning of America's new standard, or is it just a bold experiment that's about to be reined in? The answer is going to shape corporate accountability for years to come.